We are so honored to be here. My name is David Lieberman. I am a Shevet group leader. I've been a group leader for, I guess, eight or 9 years now. I'm going to introduce Dana.
Hi, I'm Dana Levinson Steiner. I was a Rosh Hodesh group leader for many years at Temple Israel Center in White Plains, as well as at the 92nd Street Y. We are so thrilled to engage in an amazing conversation with these incredible alumni who are going to talk a little bit about their experience in Rosh Hodesh and Shevet Achim.
But first, why don't we talk a little bit about our experience as group leaders and how
Happy
that's
to talk
affected us.
about myself.
So I was part of the first pilot that worked in the boys program for Moving Traditions. At the time, it was called the Brotherhood. Now it's called Shevet. And I found that in my work, being trained and then working with young men, and then also eventually becoming a trainer and working at the Moving Traditions conferences, working with other educators who are taking on this role and this responsibility, I found that it's been really a life-changing work. Even though I went to very progressive Jewish day schools and I went to liberal arts college, I found that despite all the encouragement I'd received to express myself and love myself, that a lot of pieces were missing that I actually found through my work with Moving Traditions and being forced really to model openness and compassion and think critically about being a man, and being forced to do that work for myself so that I could do it with the teens has really changed the way I approach the world and the way I see myself. And especially, I have to say, the mentorship of Rabbi Daniel Brenner, who has been a huge friend and teacher for me. So that's I feel really honored to be here and to be part of this work. Yeah.
So I have been a lifelong feminist, and I grew up in a house that really valued independence and really a strong sense of self. But with all of that being said, I also recognize that when you're in middle school, it's some of the most uncomfortable and strange experiences that a young girl or young man or a non-binary child can have. It's a really confusing time. So when I discovered Rosh Chodesh, It's a Girl thing, I was completely enamored with the idea that women could come together once a month and really gather around this incredible Jewish calendar that we have, it really speaks to who we are as women and really speaks to who we are as people. And it was such a privilege to be able to work with 7th grade girls in White Plains and with 9th grade young women, including some daughters of some folks in this room who are really incredible. Maddie, really phenomenal. And I'm also a Jewish communal professional. I serve as the director of Access Global for AJC, the American Jewish Committee. Woo! And previously, I worked at the Bronfman Center for Jewish Student Life at NYU for many years. So my work in Rosh Chodesh, It's a Girl thing, really made a lot of sense for me. Even though I was working with college students, it was like looking in the mirror and really allowing me to understand, okay, this is what middle schoolers and high schoolers are currently dealing with. I know what college students are dealing with. How can we sort of work holistically and create a space in which young women can really feel confident? They can feel prepared. Much of the 9th grade curriculum last year focused on consent, which is such an important conversation that should not only be happening in college, obviously should not be happening only with adults. So to have that conversation with middle schoolers, with high schoolers, is so critical. The work that Moving Traditions does is really life-changing. It gives folks the ability to feel like they have agency, they have choice, they have decision-making abilities, but I don't need to tell you that because all of these amazing young people can. So what we would love is to hear, who are you? Tell us a little bit about yourselves, your name, how long you were involved with Rosh Hodesh or Shevet Achim, and anything else we should know.
Thank you so much. My name is Becky Barnett. I'm currently 23 years old. I am working as a study coordinator in clinical research at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. This is something that I'm doing on the path to medical school, so if you have any suggestions, please let me know. I graduated from Cornell in 2017, and beforehand I was a Rosh Hodesh member from 2008 until 2013 at Temple Shrei Tefillah in Bedford, New York.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrew Sobelsohn, and I did Shevet through middle school and then freshman year of high school with David. I'm currently at Columbia University and about to graduate next week. So it's happening. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Julia Friedman. I just finished my freshman year at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I was a Rosh Hodesh member from throughout middle school and then my freshman year of high school at Congregation Beth Elohim in Park Slope.
Hi, I'm Bennett Decker. I use he, him, his pronouns. I go to the joint program between Columbia University and the Jewish Theological Seminary, so also just a few blocks uptown. Studying political science at Columbia and Talmud at JTS, trying to figure out if I want to do Judaism or politics with my life. See my bio for the joke about that. I'll turn the mic over now.
Great. Thank you for sharing, everyone. So you've talked a little bit about your experiences being in either Rosh Chodesh or Shevet Achim, and we would love to hear about the impact that your group leaders had on you.
Okay, so David was actually my group leader. Really upstanding guy and amazing. Yeah, he doesn't pay me to say this. He's a really good role model and mentor, and a lot of things that he taught us about communication, about building friendships. Our group is still very, very good friends, and I'm still in touch with a lot of the guys that I knew from middle school, which is something really incredible, and I think speaks a lot to David's ability as a teacher and somebody to inspire. So it's pretty amazing.
My group leader was someone who we were really close with and had the perfect balance of friend and role model / mentor. And throughout the college process was also, even though she wasn't our group leader anymore, she was someone who we all turned to, even though it had been a year or two since she had been working with us, which was something that was really special.
My group leader was amazing. His name is Monson. I'm assuming there's someone in this room who probably knows him. He's a really well-connected guy in the Jewish world. I'm a really big soccer fan, which is one of my off-brand facts. Ami was this, for those who are fans of soccer, there's this term called man manager. It's a manager who doesn't just like do the tactics and like substitute players, but actually really connects with their players and knows what they're feeling off the field. And that was Ami. Ami would drive Shevet Achim guys to and from Shevet Achim meetings and really like take time out of his life to bond outside of the 1 hour we spent together every few weeks to like really get to know us on a personal level. And that was like incredibly inspiring for me as I like now step into mentorship roles later in life and really demonstrated for me the kind of mentor that I want to be for all younger people that I do work with.
And we were really lucky to have a group leader who decided that she would take us under her wing. She has a number of sons, and we became the pseudo-daughters in her life that she never had. So she served as not only a maternal and a role model to us all, but also as a really great friend and a support, as someone who was there to support us throughout the whole process. She's also someone who throughout the year, she'll reach out to us, and as we're done with college, she always tries to get us to come back together, and we do still in New York City, those of us who are still here, and that's always a really amazing group to reconnect with, and she's the one who's always leading the charge in that.
Thanks. I'm wondering if the panelists would be willing to talk about some of the skills that they developed as part of moving traditions and ways that they might be drawing on them still today. Anyone feel like taking that?
Yeah. So like I said, I think that like engaging with people and the people that you mentor in really close and personal ways. I do a lot of work with LGBTQ youth, LGBTQ Jewish youth. A lot of them come from backgrounds that aren't necessarily positive for one of those two identities. Either their Judaism they don't feel particularly connected to, or their queerness is not something that's accepted as part of their community. And you can't just like sit with them for an hour and like run through the program and then be done. And the way that like that was modeled for me in Shevet of like how to really like get inside the head one-on-one of a person that you're mentoring is still an incredibly valuable skill that I use today.
Sure. So something that we really grew with in our group was open conversation and learning how to have unique and like controversial conversations in a good manner. And going to school in the Midwest was very different than my childhood in New York. And so I often found myself having conversations with people who had never met a Jewish person before and had never had a friend that was Jewish before. So I was put into a situation where I was having these conversations that I was not used to having at home, but I found myself more confident than I had expected in having those conversations.
And bouncing off what Bennett said, we were part of a group that was really encouraged to connect. And I think that that's something really important now more than ever, is that Joan, our group leader, was really firm with us in doing things like putting away our phones, which is a crazy concept to think about now, having teenagers put away their phones. And for us, it was truly transformative. Putting away our phones and not talking about homework and studying so much, and especially growing up in Northern Westchester where there's a lot of pressure around college and the next step. It was just an amazing time to relax and to totally disconnect from all the things that were going outside of the room and really connect with each other. So that was really, really important value that I take to today in life. I had a birthday party recently for myself, and I asked that everyone leave their shoes and their phones at the door. And it totally transformed the whole evening, and I don't think that this would have been as important of a thing to do had it not been for our group leader and the messages that she brought to us.
Yeah, so of the many things that David taught us, I think that one of the things that has stuck with me throughout my life has been how to process emotions and how to do it in a group setting. I think being a middle school-aged guy, you have a lot of questions about masculinity, about what society expects of you, and I remember watching an Old Spice ad. We all watched it together. We deconstructed things that we related to, things that we didn't, and I think just knowing that people are going through the same thing as you all the time, and having the same questions about their identities and about how they fit into society is something that I've definitely taken through high school and through college and probably will keep on using in my whole life.
Awesome. I love the idea of phoneless anything. That sounds fantastic. And Julia, you really tapped into this idea that, you know, above all, the programming offered by Moving Traditions is inherently Jewish. There's really amazing Jewish values, whether it's leaning into the Jewish calendar or different Jewish prayers. So how would you say that your Moving Traditions experience enriched how you connect to your Judaism or your Jewish identities?
The one thing that we learned a lot about and I focused on in my group was community, and all throughout my life I was a member of my congregation, but Rosh Hodesh group was kind of my first thing that was personal to me and personal to my friends, and that was something that we shared together. And going to college, that was one of the most important things for me, was finding a similar or different Jewish community that I could be a part of. And so now I'm really involved in Chabad at my university, which is really nice.
Yeah, so I remember in synagogue and Hebrew school being read a lot of different texts and learning about Jewish values and things, and it didn't always stick. And David would bring in different texts to our groups, and we'd see how Jewish scholars debated the same issues that we're dealing with today, and we'd learn about different values. And I think that brought it to me in a way that was much more personal than I felt in Hebrew school or synagogue. And then when I went back into synagogue after Brotherhood and those experiences, I think it became a much stronger community for me, and I felt that I could relate much more to my Jewish identity.
And for me, I think one of the things was bringing Jewish values and relating them to the things that were going on in our everyday lives. So after going to Jewish camp, I went to Eisner for 10 years, there were certain things that we talked about at camp that we didn't talk about at home, certain things that we talked about in our Hebrew school classes or in our youth group that we didn't talk about elsewhere. And Rosh Hodesh was a place that we got to talk about things that really mattered to us, whether it was body image, crushes, other things that were happening in our life, and we were allowed to talk about them openly, and also we were allowed to talk about how they related to our Jewish values. And I miss that. I don't think that we get to talk about that as much, and I don't think that there's as much access for people outside of a typical synagogue setting to do so.
Yeah, I think that you're right on, that part of the power of the group is it's not only that we're bringing the Jewish texts that speak to things that are going on in our lives, but also that as Jewish role models and as a Jewish community, we're saying we care about your development and we want to look holistically at the person that you're becoming, and that we want you to become an adult here with us in this Jewish space, sharing these Jewish values. So, we're not always diving into like huge Masechets, the Talmud and stuff, but the idea is that we're always coming from a perspective of like growing our community and growing strong, responsible. We talk a lot about like menschkeit in Shevet Achim, and the idea of what does it mean to be a good person, a good man is inseparable, at least for me, from the way I was raised and the way I understand the world, from what it means to be a good Jew. And oftentimes parents are asking me, well, where's the Jewish piece here? And I'm saying it's all the Jewish piece. Like, I don't know any other way to be a human being other than to be a Jewish human being, and that's the only thing I can pass on to your kids, is that perspective. So I'm wondering if any of you, we talked about the way Moving Traditions brings the Jewish text to life and tries to relate them to things that are happening in the lives of teens. But I'm wondering, in thinking about the lens of gender, which is such a huge part of this group, if any of your experiences in the Moving Traditions group have sort of affected specifically the way you think about your gender identity, what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman.
So I recognize that there's gender that's implied in these programs, and I think that that's a normal part of our world. But I think something that actually Rosh Hodesh taught us was that being a woman, it is what you want it to be. And you make a woman out of who you want to be, and there's no borders or boundaries in that. And for us, we are really excited to have the support and the freedom to decide what a woman or what kind of woman we wanted to be. And that was a really supportive thing for us. And also, I think it was more important that we were developing into Jewish individuals than necessarily someone of a particular gender. And that's something that I've carried with me today. And also, I just remember bringing these lessons home to my younger brother. And just because I was in a group of people that identify as women, it didn't mean that these lessons didn't apply to him as well. And at the time, there wasn't a group that was specifically for him. And I kind of wish that he had the opportunity to participate in something that I was able to as well.
So I really resonate with that. When I was in middle school, I was this. Can you help? When I was in middle school, I was this like little closeted gay boy whose sporting ability could probably be best described as he tried, and despite my love of soccer, and that was like really what it meant to be like a guy. In middle school, in my like tiny hallway of a Jewish middle school, was like, can you catch a frisbee and can you throw a football? Neither of which I can really do. And so Shevet Achim became this like incredible place where that was like totally flipped on its head, and where guys who I would see, and I like grew up with in middle school, now that we were in high school, who were like really, really great on a field, would be put out of their comfort zone to like be really reflective about themselves and their feelings and what has been going on in their lives. And for me, that was something that came a little bit more naturally. And so like realizing and like watching it unfold before my eyes that like masculinity wasn't just throwing a football, catching a frisbee, hitting a baseball, but also like being reflective, thinking deeply about yourself and your relationships with other people, and the way in which you conduct those relationships was like incredibly formative, and still like is a project that I feel like I'm engaging in and like working on and tinkering with as I now am like 21, looking back on like when I was 16.
Yeah, I think to build off of that, one of the great things that David taught us was that developing, growing, and becoming a young adult and a young man is to learn to respect women, to talk about women and how you relate with them. And I think a lot of our immature humor was really well directed at productive conversations, and he did a really good job of keeping things fun, but also having conversations where we could talk about what it meant to relate with girls in our grade or the female figures in our lives. And I think that was really transformative because you don't have that chance on your school soccer team. You don't have that chance at the lunch table. There really isn't a space that's structured and going to force you to engage with those types of questions and also be something that's fun and that you want to go to every week. So that's stayed with me for sure.
So amongst my group, as common with teenage or mid-tween girls is like popularity and some sort of hierarchy in middle school. And something that you kind of mentioned was the way that our group would break down that total hierarchy, and everyone was just sitting there as an equal group of girls, which was really special because as someone who didn't have the most friends in middle school or high school, I was in a group of girls that like we were all just equal in that room and were able to talk about the same things and ended up becoming best friends with girls in my group who I had never spoken to otherwise because of the difficulties of middle school. Yeah.
So while I personally am not yet a parent, I've worked in a number of spaces, whether it's Hillel or Rosh Hodesh, where I feel like everyone is my children and often refer to them as my kids, which is hopefully okay. But as such, there's a real feeling of reflection when you're the facilitator, of saying to yourself, okay, what was I like when I was this age? And what was I experiencing? And what do I wish I knew? I would imagine many of us find ourselves in either the parenting process or with young people in our lives saying like, oh, I wish they knew this. I wish they understood, you know, how important they are, how valued they are. And these are the things they need to know in order to sort of come to that place of nirvana, I suppose. So I imagine many of us in the room are parents, and maybe some of you have teens in your lives who are approaching the age of perhaps being involved in a moving traditions group. So for the folks on this panel, if you could say something to the parents or the grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, those who have a teen in their lives, what would you say to them about why their young person should involve themselves with moving traditions?
I feel like a lot of parents are, luckily mine were not like this. Shout out to my dad who's right up here. But I feel like a lot of parents are really invested in like boiling their like kids' success and like metric for success for like 2 years there down to their SAT score. And that's whack. First of all, because like tests don't define you, blah, 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 all that. But also, like, how much is the 30th SAT, like practice SAT that you drive your kids 30 minutes to and 30 minutes back from, like, gonna matter? Like, what is this added from the 29th? And what difference, tangibly, is it gonna make in your child to send them to a 30th SAT for 2 hours instead of sending them to Shevet Achim or Rosh Hodesh for an hour? Like, what's the cost benefit analysis that's going on here? And ultimately, like, I think that we live in a society that like tells us to care about numbers more than we care about character. And I think that like what Shevet Achim is doing is something that is not tangible and not quantifiable, and you can't really measure it, and you don't get to see the immediate effects of it. You only get to see them 10 years later. It's like a fine scotch. And right, but once it's there, right? Like once it's there for good. And I think that that thought process like needs to be taken into account. And the amount of time that you're going to invest in getting it down to a number, getting it up to a number versus like where you want your child to be as a person.
along the same lines, I think when you're talking about, when you think about investment, I think something that I really got out of Rosh Hodesh was my investment that my parents made in me as a person. There's so little that goes on in a classroom, at least when I was in public school, that was talking about how to make you a good person, rather than teaching you about the Civil War, which I couldn't tell you anything about, or teaching you about sentence structure, which I couldn't tell you anything about. But I think that this, it's 1 hour a month, maybe. For us, it was like 5 hours a month, and it was the best 5 hours of the whole month. But those 5 hours were transformative, and it was something that we always look forward to in the way that there was nothing else like that we were doing in our month, whether it was, I couldn't even tell you what I was doing in high school, but besides the times that I was spending with my friends in their homes or outside of class, this was the best part of the whole month. And I can't say that enough, and I can't tell you anything about my history classes, but I can tell you so much about all the different Jewish values that we got out of this short investment that made so much of a difference.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what's been said, again, there's no space like this. I think especially in that middle school, early high school age, it's really just magical. I think when you come into that room with the same group of people and you really get close and you get to talk about all these things that you don't get to talk about or process at any other point in your life at that time, I think looking back on it, it's just, like the scotch, it gets better every year. And it's, it's just something really powerful. So I think it's definitely investment in who you are as a person, who you are as a Jew, who you are in the world, and how you want to relate with other people and just becoming someone better.
Also, something that I found really special was, yes, I learned a lot about the Jewish values from the Torah at a young age throughout elementary school, but coming into middle school, it was a very unique way to look at my life and look at my friends' lives through this Jewish lens, which I've definitely brought into my life now, and looking at it through an analytic Jewish lens is something very different than how I approached my life and continue to approach my life now.
I want to speak to what I hear most from parents, which is, I don't know what you do with my kids, but keep doing it. And that seems to be, I think, one of the key components of a moving traditions group is confidentiality. Teenagers are naturally sort of finding themselves, and part of that is pushing their parents away and sort of building sort of a wall to allow themselves to grow up a little bit, to give themselves that distance. But one thing is essential, is that we don't want teens to be without adult leadership, adult role models, without that kind of the care that an adult and that can bring them, and they're just developmentally they don't want that from their parents right now. So I found that when I was leading the Andrew's group, met every month for like 4 to 5 years. Basically, they came together and they developed a network with each other. Like, they could turn to each other if they needed advice, if they needed support, and they could turn to me. So I would get phone calls at 1 a.m. if they were in trouble and needed advice, or if they were in a sticky situation and didn't necessarily want to talk to their parents first. And the incredible privilege of being someone that a teen is willing to turn to for help and for advice is something that I really don't take lightly, and I feel I feel so lucky that I was able to have that kind of relationship, and I really wish that I had that when I was a teen. I think it would have really helped some of my decision-making processes, and I think that the other thing is that we have a lot of fun at the groups, and they keep coming back because that they're having a really good time. So, yeah.
The one thing I'll say, and then I know we're going to wrap up here, is that in my experience of being a group leader, I would say that even though my role was to help empower these amazing women and really give them the confidence to approach the world in a number of different ways, they actually ended up giving me a lot of the confidence that I needed to approach the world as a then mid-20s person, and now as a slightly older than mid-20s person. I'll actually say that my Rosh Hodesh group inspired me to found a women's organization, because I realized that there was just such an opportunity here that was inspired by Jewish values, was inspired by the amazing women that I worked with. And the organization I founded was called Chutzpanit, From Campus to the C-Suite. And it was a reclamation of the idea of chutzpah that my 7th grade girls, who were full of amazing chutzpah, were so unabashed and proud of how confident they were in exactly who they were. And that inspired me to want to be able to sort of bottle up their incredible energy and find a way to put it out into the universe. So I really can't thank Moving Traditions enough, and also for the incredible women who have inspired me throughout the years, as young as 7th grade, to really give me the confidence as a now 31-year-old working lady to really give them so much kavod there. So what an incredible panel, right? I mean, I suspect that in 10 years, when they've aged, not maybe like Scotch, like cheese maybe, for those of us who are not Scotch aficionados, you'll be leading such an incredible panel just like this. So we really want to thank you for taking your time. Thank you for being such an amazing audience. Congratulations to all of the incredible people in the room tonight, and thank you so much.
Thank you.